All right, good morning. Hi, everybody. It's Lauren McGoodwin, founder and CEO of Career Contessa. We've got Ashley Feinstein Gerstley from the Fiscal Femme. We're down in this little corner if you guys can't see us. Happy Wednesday morning. You guys are amazing already in the live chat, letting us know where you're joining us from. I'm in my home in Los Angeles. Ashley, where are you joining us from?
I'm in Hoboken in New Jersey.
Amazing. So we've got East Coast and West Coast going on. You guys are in for a treat. Ashley has an entire presentation, which is nice because you'll get visuals along with ways that she's going to teach you how to save money. So I'm just going to go over some housekeeping items for anybody who this is their very first webinar. Let us know in the live chat if it is. We always love that. I know a lot of you come to these webinars on a regular basis too. So it's I feel like this is kind of that weekly powwow with people you know, but you've never actually met kind of thing. So Ashley is going to be doing this presentation. I'm going to be controlling the slides. So Ashley, when it's time to move slides, just say next slide and I'll move it on my side. So that means also, you guys, it's really important that any questions you have, they go at the bottom where it says ask a question. It's really important that you put your questions there so that people can, or that Ashley at the end, we can answer them. And what's cool is that we can, I like that, long-time listener, first-time chatter. I love that. I do feel like, typing in the chat for the first time is kind of an exciting thing. So that means any questions you have, put them there so that we can answer and record them at the end. Everybody who signed up for this webinar ahead of time will get emailed a replay. Ashley also has some really cool resources she's sharing. So if you are first time attending, some people have come to webinars all the time, so they can kind of help guide you. Any tech issues, I forgot to talk about that for the housekeeping item. Any tech issues, it's best to join the webinars using on the Chrome browser. And then we've all found that pretty much the best thing to do is hard refresh, hop on and hop back on if you are having a delay or anything like that. Okay, so Ashley, I am going to mute me and get off my video so that your presentation can be up. And then I'm going to make your presentation big. And when you can see it up on the screen the way you want it, will you just verbally let me know it looks good?
Perfect.
Okay, and then Ashley, also, when I hand it over to you, make sure you do your introduction because I did that quickly, which is your name. I assume in your presentation you're going to do that, but just FYI for the people who don't know you, they definitely need to. So, okay, let me get off of here.
Yeah, it already looks great to me. So, perfect. Bye, Lauren. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to. Hold on, let me see. The presentation just went away for me. And it's back. Okay, that's perfect.
Okay, yeah, I'll just leave it like this. And then even though it has that border, I'll leave it like this and you tell me next screen then.
Okay, perfect. So I'm very excited to be partnering with Career Contessa and getting to spend the morning or afternoon, depending on where you are, with all of you to share sneaky ways to save money. Like Lauren mentioned, I'm Ashley Feinstein Gerstley. I'm a money coach and founder of the Fiscal Femme. And next slide, I'll take them through what we're gonna talk about today. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about me, why I do what I do. We're gonna go through the 7 sneaky ways to save money because I believe it doesn't have to be hard and we don't have to trudge and toil to save money. There's some things that we can do to make it easier on ourselves. And then I'm going to talk about specifically how to make sure that money stays in our savings account versus we create it and then it gets taken out over and over again. And also talking about how we can live big, meaningful lives while also saving for our goals. So I'm not going to tell you to stay home, well, maybe now we're all staying home, but I'm not going to tell you to do nothing, eat ramen alone in order to save money. We can really align our spending with what's important to us so our lives look big and meaningful while we hit our goals. And then, like Lauren mentioned, put any questions you have in the ask a question box and we'll get to Q&A at the end. Sounds good? All right, next slide. So for those finding my work, I mentioned I'm Ashley. I founded a company called the Fiscal Femme, and the reason I started this company is actually because I needed it myself. I studied finance in college, so I was a finance major. I worked in finance, I was an investment banker, and then in corporate finance, and I still knew nothing about my own money. And the reason there was a time in my life where I really needed to dig into it for the first time, and that was when I switched from my investment banking job to my corporate finance job. I took a big pay cut in order to have a better lifestyle, because in my banking job, I was working on average till midnight, eating every meal at my desk and meeting friends in groups of 3 or more, so that if I had to bail, they weren't all alone. So anyway, I was very excited to switch jobs, but with this pay cut, I was bleeding through my money, my savings, and it was completely unsustainable. And so when I went to dig in on how to figure this stuff out, I found that so many of the resources were really boring and daunting, mostly written by old white men for old white men, like keeping me out of the club. And I was adapting some of the things I was reading to work for me, and I was really excited to share it with other people, because I found so much power and freedom from having control of my money. I was able to transition jobs, later was able to leave my job to self-fund the Fiscal Femme. And so it's my mission to share this, and even bigger than that, to end inequality through financial well-being, which I know is a very big task. But just because in my own privileged life, having savings and money meant power and freedom over my choices, and I want that for all women. And I truly believe that if all women were wealthy, we'd solve most of the problems in the world. When we're financially well, we can negotiate harder to be paid fairly, which is something Lauren talks about all the time. We can leave people in jobs when we want. We could take more risks in our careers because we're not worried about making a mistake and the financial implications of that. We can invest in causes and businesses that are important to us. So to me, women having wealth means that we get better businesses, we have more women leaders, we have more investment back into our families and communities, and the list goes on, and they're all good things. The Fiscal Femme's mission is to get women wealthy, all women. So next slide. And I just want to talk about that this webinar is all about things that we can do to improve our own financial well-being by saving more money. But it's important to address that there are major systemic issues at play in the money and personal finance space. So when it comes to personal finance, women are not on the equal playing field to men, and women of color, specifically Black women, have infinitely more working against them. And every week I send out this weekly email called The Money Musing. And it has 3 different sections. We talk about like something I write for myself, and then there's a money move of the week, because we got to make money moves. Our progress is all around action. And then I feature something every week. So the latest one I sent was around the racial wealth gap. And I talked about 3 pieces of history of many, many more events that happened where the Black community has been stripped of wealth through policies, massacres, and illegal scandals. So I specifically talked about Freedom Savings Bank, the Tulsa Massacre, and redlining. And these were things that I never learned about in history class, but they're really important to understand, because we cannot talk about personal finance and money without talking about racial equity. And there are a bazillion systemic things at play, but today this webinar is about the things that we can do at the individual level to improve our financial well-being and save. And the reason that it's important that we all get wealthy, and this is like the motivational pep talk, is that the more Black women and actively anti-racist women who build individual wealth, the more we'll see the institutional changes, the changes in leadership, the changes in policy that we need to see. So all that to say, hopefully gives you some motivation and context that we're not starting from equal places, but we want to get all of you wealthy, and we need to get all of you wealthy. And from there, we can dive into the 7 sneaky ways to save money and start building that wealth. So hopefully you all are as pumped as I am about that. All right. So step 1, so we're going to go through 7 steps. As I go through each of these steps, there's going to be an action item that comes along with it. So I talked about this a little bit, but making progress is all about action. It doesn't have to be a huge daunting action little steps build up to big results. So if you have either open up a sheet on your computer, like a Google Doc or a Word doc, or if you have a little notebook with you, I'm going to take you through some exercises, and throughout we'll have you share things in the chat. So have that with you. And at the end, so I'm going to go through these 7 steps. There might or might not be a bonus step. I'm going to ask you to commit to taking 1 step at the end, because we want you to take that action. So as we're going through, think about which step you want to be taking. So the first step is to separate and automate. And the reason the step is really important is how we traditionally view saving money does not work. And there are many reasons, other reasons that it's not working, but many of us have very little saved in America. So how we think of savings is we earn money. We often work really hard for that money. We prioritize paying everybody else first. So we pay our bills, we might get gifts, we live our lives, and then we hope that there will be money left over to save at the end of the month or the paycheck. And there usually isn't. There usually isn't. There are some unicorns out there, I've met them, who are able to save this way, but most of us end up taking up everything that's in our bank account. And we think, you know what, I just need to earn more, and then I'll finally start saving money. And what happens, we get a raise, we get a promotion, we do the same thing, and there's still no money left over to save. So one of the reasons this happens is this concept called Parkinson's law. And it's this idea that things take up as much space as we give them, and it shows up everywhere. So if you have a call scheduled, let's say a meeting for work, and you only have one thing to talk about, somehow if you schedule an hour, that meeting's still going to take an hour. Or your junk drawer always fills up, or your closet fills up, or your expenses will always fill your bank account. And so what we want to do is treat our saving like an expense. And to do that, we want to prioritize it. We want to pay ourselves first. So 2 key parts of this are having a completely separate place for our savings accounts, because when we have our checking and our savings account in the same place with the same bank and we log in, it just feels too available. It's too easy to transfer it over, and we'll make decisions consciously or subconsciously that take up that money. So I'm a huge fan of having online savings accounts. And the biggest reason is because they're completely separate. The money is available to you in 2 or 3 days if you need it for an emergency, but you don't log in and see that money available. The other great things, they're free. They earn a little bit of interest. Rates are really low right now. So 1.5 is probably the highest you can get, but that's 150 times better than what we're getting in our brick and mortar savings. And as interest rates go up, that will increase as well. So the action item here is deciding how much and how often you will contribute to these online savings accounts. And the key here is having it be automatic. So as soon as your paycheck comes in or whatever money is coming in, to have that set up to transfer automatically out, so you're paying yourself first. And if you're thinking, Ashley, there's no way I can save, start with as little as $5 a week or $5 a paycheck to see if you miss it. And then you can always check in a few months and up the ante. So my question here is, how many of you have online savings accounts, and how many have automatic contributions saved up? And I'm going to send you a link of my favorite online savings accounts. In case it's helpful. Like, what is my criteria? You want it to be free? You want it to be able to have different buckets because of something we'll talk about later? All right, awesome. So that's step 1, and that's a big step, and I think it's a really important step. And I'm saying yes to both. I use Digit, I do. Yes, several online accounts, awesome. Yeah, and someone said yes, but not automatic. So this is great. If you're missing one or part of this piece, now you can add it up. And the cool part is most of the time, especially when we start with a small amount, we'll notice that we don't even miss it because we didn't really know it was available to us. And that's why it's a sneaky way to save. All right, amazing. So So I sent my favorite online savings accounts, my criteria in there. Sometimes people send other ones that are great. There's a ton out there. I just narrowed it down with certain criteria. All right, so step 2, sneaky way to save, is to become aware by keeping a money journal. And this might sound really simple, but most of us aren't really clear on where our money's going, because it is so easy to spend money now, especially, well, I think there's a tendency to not want to know where our money's going. If you imagine like us as ostriches with our head in the sand. And then also technology makes it really easy to not know where our money's going. We like, especially now, no one's using cash. Everything's online. We're hitting buttons and things are showing up from Amazon at our door. Everything's on credit cards. And so it's very easy to not know. And when we're using credit cards, we don't actually know what we spent. Like, we're not feeling that the pain, the money's not leaving our bank account until the statement is due. So there's this lag in our awareness of what we've spent. And so the money journal is a very effective yet simple way to reconnect with where our money's going, much like a food journal or a time journal, both of things that I've done. And all you do is you write down everything you spend and earn. You can do this in whatever way is easiest for you. Again, a theme here, make it easy on yourself. If you enjoy handwriting things, and it could be a hint if you're handwriting right now notes, then keep it with you and jot down everything that you spend and earn on a notebook. I keep mine on notes on my phone in notes, just because I always have my phone with me, sadly. So it's very easy to track it there. You can use an app, but really, as long as you're manually adding it in, then that's great. The key thing here, it does not have to be perfect. I think in all of personal finance and probably other areas of our lives too, one of the biggest ways we cheat ourselves is giving up as soon as we make a mistake. And this is a brand new habit for most of us. And so we're going to forget to keep it, and that's okay. Try to remember what you missed, pick up where you left off. If you're noticing it's not ever happening, maybe set a calendar reminder. So just try to be more conscious of how you can make this easy on yourself, how we can remind ourselves. So the action item here is to write down everything you spend and earn for a month. If this sounds horrible to you, then it's probably a really good step for you. That's probably a sign that this is a really good step to take. But if it sounds too daunting, start with a day. And you can even set up rewards for yourself. Like, if I keep my money journal, I'm going to get to do this thing or watch this show or whatever it is, because we work really well with rewards. And I have a template for you if you want to use a template for your money journal that I can share. All right, so that is step 2, keeping a money journal. And it's interesting, there's so many apps, but I've noticed there's a lot of us are moving back to handwriting things and wanting to be really conscious in a different way. Because if we use an app like Mint, for example, which if it works for you, great, but in a lot of ways, if we still want to have the money journal, because it's syncing automatically. So it's more of this automatic thing that we don't know. Okay, step 3 is a really fun step. It's to look at the opportunity cost of our spending. And to take you through this exercise, I'm going to just start by having you do something. So list out some things that make you happy. And next to each of those things, and maybe it's fine if it's just one, on average, what does it cost? So you'll see the boxes here in the slide. It says list out some things that make you happy, and on average, what does it cost? So if it's like dinner with friends after I'm able to do that after coronavirus, how much on average does dinner with your friends cost? Or a getaway, or it could also be a goal like paying down a credit card, something that will make you happy and how much it costs. And I'd love, anyone's up for sharing, and they can be big or small. So any of your happy items, feel free to share them in a chat. Travel, awesome. Hair and spa, amazing. Vacation, yeah, vacation's a big one. Yoga, hopefully soon. Yeah, travel hopefully soon. Getaway, vacation at the beach, traveling, house cleaning, yes. Theater, amazing. Coffee, yes. Dinner with friends, going, amazing. Vacation, concerts, so many. So the only thing I'd say is for example, the yoga or the gym membership I'm seeing, we'd want to make sure that if we had more money, we could get more of this item. So if it's a yoga membership, we wouldn't probably, and it's unlimited classes, we wouldn't want, more money wouldn't get us more memberships because we wouldn't want to buy more memberships because we already get all the benefits. So as long as you can get more money, or you could get more of this item or experience if you had more money, then it's a good fit for this exercise. All right, next slide. Okay, so this item that you just wrote down is your opportunity cost. And what is opportunity cost? Opportunity cost is something that we're dealing with all day, every day. We just don't usually think of it that way. So by being on this webinar with me, you gave up the opportunity to do anything else during this hour, right? As long as you're focused. When you choose a restaurant, you're giving up the opportunity to eat at another restaurant. When you choose an entree, you're giving up the opportunity to eat other food at that restaurant. So we're dealing with these choices all day, every day. And the same thing is true for our money. Regardless of how much or how little we have, we can only spend each dollar once, unfortunately. So this idea of maximizing the joy we get per dollar spent is really important. So we don't want to waste away these dollars on things that are not important or don't bring us joy. And looking at them in terms of our opportunity cost makes that much easier. So this is a two-part step. You have your happy item and how much it costs on average. Now, look at it in terms of your other expenses. So you can look at it in terms of every other expense you have or some expenses you've been questioning. The action item here is to look at it, all your expenses over the next week in terms of your opportunity cost. So here's the example that I give. If I'm like, you know what, I have HBO Go because I know that streaming services are a big expense for a lot of us right now. There's a lot more TV happening. And that cost me $14.99 per month. So the annual cost is $180, let's say, because I'm multiplying the cost per month times 12. And if my opportunity cost item was dinners with friends, after that's allowed to happen, and let's say they cost on average $60 with tip and tax and everything, then I could trade my HBO Go for 3 dinners with friends. Now, the cool part about this is it's completely your choice what you want to do with your dollar. So much of the work that we're doing today is helping you take an honest look at what's happening with your money so you can decide what's truly treating you what you want to do, because there's no right or wrong answer. Personal finance is so personal. And someone might say, HBO Go is everything to me. I would rather not have those dinners with my friends. And someone else said, wow, I really would rather have more dinners with my friends. I didn't even realize that my HBO Go was costing me that. So we just want to be honest with ourselves when we look at these opportunity costs and make the choice that's best for us. So quickly, just test out a few of your expenses in terms of your opportunity cost. Maybe just start with one. And when you see it that way, is it worth it to you? There's no right or wrong answers. Looking at the comments. So when you do it, let us know in the comments if you decided, and this is the big question, did you decide to let go of expenses after looking at it this way? And it doesn't have to be all or nothing. I could say, you know what, I'm going to, well, I guess with HBO Go, it might be all or nothing unless we can negotiate down the rate. But sometimes when we're looking at it in terms of, I had someone in a workshop was getting smoothies, which really can add up. And I think he could trade his smoothie habit for 18 or 30 dinners with his friends. So it doesn't mean that he can never have a smoothie again and can do all those dinners with his friends. He might decide, I'm going to do one smoothie a week instead of every day. And the cool part is that when we do something less frequently, it often becomes more special. And we enjoy it more because it's more of a treat. So it can be a balance too. Someone's saying, yes, great to use this when you're considering a new expense too. Like, what am I giving up for when I add this new expense? Because we are, whether we are aware of it or not. Amazing. Subscriptions. Yeah, everyone's looking at the subscriptions. There's so many of them. It's very easy to just get them all added up. Someone said taking the tollway to work versus lunch out during the workday. Eat out less in order to have my Cabo vacation. Amazing. Yes, this is a really good, someone mentioned this, is if you're not spending a lot because you're at home and you're eating groceries, it's interesting. I've definitely seen people spending as much or more despite being at home because we're bored. It's easy to shop. There's a lot of sales. We can do takeout. But if you are someone who is saving more and happy with what you're spending, this is a great exercise to do as you decide to add things back in. All right, next slide. So they're all really important steps. So I keep saying that, but this is a really important step because when we are trying really hard to create a spending plan or a budget, or we'll talk about more about those later, we can be completely on track, everything's going great, and then this is where I see things kind of fall through the cracks. So anything that happens in our life that is more irregular or a bigger expense, we can create a sinking fund for. And a sinking fund is just money we set aside on a regular basis to spend at a later date. So a great example of this is, so many people mention travel. So there's a lot of travelers on here. We'll have to pay for a vacation or a flight all at once. It can feel really tight as far as our cash flow. So we might have to put it on a credit card, and then we're like, how are we going to pay this? Or we have to pull money from savings that was not really for travel, but that's the only way we could pay for it, or it just makes our budget feel really tight that month. So instead, what we can do, let's say I want to take a $3,000 trip. I would have $115 per paycheck. If I'm paid 26 times a year, transfer automatically every paycheck to a travel fund. So we want to create a separate savings account. This would be like a separate bucket or a separate savings account in our online savings, and I'd call it travel fund. People do this often for the holidays because that's a time where we're spending more money. Even if you have like an expensive haircut, if you're getting a cut and color, if you have tuition payments, if you're saving up for a move, moves can be really expensive. So I want to move next year. I'm going to start putting money aside for that move. It essentially smooths out our spending so that we're putting away money now. And then when it's time to make that big expense, the money's there waiting for us. So it really helps because a lot of times we do cash flow accounting. So if there's money in my bank account, I feel like I'm doing great. I think it's money I'm able to save or spend. But really, if I have a big expense coming up, that's money that should be going towards prepping for that expense, or I'm going to feel the pain of that later. So this, basically the action item here is to think through some of your larger, more irregular expenses over the next year or two, and make it easy on yourself and plan for them and have money transfer over automatically to sinking funds. And I have here, for more details on sinking funds, I have a bigger article. All right, so those are sinking funds, and they're really, this is, if you've tried to make a plan or a budget before and they kind of fall through, this is one of the biggest kind of budget busters I see, is not planning ahead for these bigger expenses and thinking that money's available for other spending. All right, next step, next slide. So the next one is to look at our annual cost. And many of us believe that having a spending plan or budget, that word, right, will be restricting or limit our fun. And I definitely believe this. I thought if I was on a budget, that means that my life is going to look less exciting. I won't get to do the things I want to do. But the the opposite is actually true. When we have a plan, it's a tremendous gift to ourselves because we're giving ourselves what we want most. We are planning ahead to allocate money for things that are not necessarily needs if we have the room for them, but that we really want to prioritize. Or we're putting aside money for our big goals. So when we don't have a plan, and this is one of the reasons I call budgets happiness allocations, because I think it's a much more fitting term. A happiness allocation is just, how am I going to allocate this pie of money I'm getting right now? Because at any given point, we're getting a certain pie of money in the way that's going to make me the happiest in the short and long term. And when we don't have that plan, every expense we make can feel guilty, especially if it's not on something we need, because we're not sure that we can afford it. So when we make that plan, it's actually hugely liberating, and we can rest assured knowing, okay, this is when I'm going to hit that goal. This is what what I can spend in this area and not sabotage other areas of my life. And even if it doesn't look the way we wanted it to at first when we put this together, which it often doesn't, spoiler alert, it's so much more important to know what's happening, and it actually relieves our stress, even if it doesn't look good, because now we can do something about it. Until we know what's happening, we can't do anything about it. So the most important part of this, and probably the part that takes the most work, is to look at each of our expenses on an annual basis. So you might see people budgeting on a weekly or a monthly basis, but because of things like we talked about, the sinking funds, the bigger expenses, the things that don't happen all the time, it's really important to look at the next 12 months. Another reason I like to look at the full year is when we're thinking about our opportunity cost and we're deciding how to allocate our money, it's not apples to apples if I'm looking at a big one-time expense versus an everyday expense. Until I look at what each of those costs annually, it's really hard for me to honestly and consciously move them around in the way that's going to be the happiest. So this will not look perfect because there are so many expenses that we have going on. Some of them might be annual subscriptions we forgot about. There's always going to be things that we forget, and that's okay. So do not let the fact that your spending plan won't be perfect stop you. So just start. As soon as you think of something you forgot, add that in. I know this takes work, so the money journal is a great thing to feed into this. What have I been spending? You can look at some previous statements. If you get some steam, you can look at the last whole year of statements and put together what the annual cost of each of your expenses is. It really is so worth it. So what a budget is, if we boil it down, the math is all it is our total income. And I like to look at the income that actually hits our bank account. So not our pre-tax salary, but what comes in minus our total expenses. And that equals what's available for us to put towards our goals, whether that's to save more money, maybe that's to go to Cabo, maybe that's to pay down debt or put aside for retirement. So that's the equation that we're trying to make work. And I have a template for you, a budgeting spreadsheet, if you were looking for one. So the step here is a big step. I know it's a big step, but it's a really important step. It is to put together your happiness allocation, but more specifically, look at the annual cost of each of your expenses, because the opportunity cost is really helpful to decide on trade-offs, but sometimes just seeing the total number of what the HBO Go is, or what someone mentioned tolls or dining out, and then it makes it really easy to say, oh, if I just did less of this, I could go on that vacation, or I could pay off that credit card. And so it helps us reallocate our money when we look at that big picture. And next slide, I just give you an idea of what this can look like in a very simple format. So we have the top is this income, and here I have a salary and other income, and then our expenses. And then so we take our total income minus our expenses, and that equals our profit. And I like to look at this. Every column is a month, and we can have actuals, so what actually happened, and then projections, just a fancy way of saying our guesstimates. So when we're clear on what happened actually in our months, it makes it easier to guesstimate what will happen in future months. So it gets more and more accurate. One of the questions I get a lot is how to actually keep this budgeting habit going, because we can make a beautiful plan, but we actually need to check in on it every month to see if it's realistic and working. So I definitely recommend that everyone has money parties every month, which is time we set aside to deal with our finances. And I call them parties because we can make them fun. So sit down, have your favorite beverage, reward yourself with a nice dinner after, or put on some music. I have a money party playlist that I play and I'm happy to share with you, that just like songs that pump you up about money. But it's essentially creating time that we're going to look and see how our expenses were for the last month so that we can adjust our spending plan going forward. So I started hosting digital money parties through the Fiscal Femme so that if you sign up, you know that you're going to come on, we'll walk you through, and you'll get those done. So we have some coming up, but I think the best way to know about them when they come up is to sign up for our money musing here. So I'll keep you posted on our monthly digital money parties that happen. And I also have a guide that walks you through. So if you're like, you know what, no thank you to doing a money party in a group, I have a guide that can take you through how to do one on your own. But I think it's probably one of the most important financial rituals we can keep, because it's how we're going to be maintaining and keeping up with this budget. So I'll get you that money party one too. I didn't have that one ready. Okay, so next slide. So this one is really fun, and it makes it fun to save, and it amps up our motivation and our results. So, but it takes awareness. So how you play the money game is you have to choose a few things. So we'll walk through this list. You have to decide what spending you want to track every month. So what spending will be included in the money game. And I recommend putting in most variable spending. So any food, groceries, anything you have control of week to week. And anything you kind of want to watch, especially. So shopping, if that's something that you want in there. And then you decide, how much do I want to spend on those items every week? And the money journal, the happiness allocation, or your budgeting spreadsheet, those are really helpful tools to help you decide how much I want to spend in these areas every week. And then you get to decide, so you've decided what spending is counted in the money game, how much I'm spending per week on those items, or what's my goal spend on those items, and then which goals will you prioritize? And that will be easier to explain once we show you how to play the money game. And then which days will you track? So let's say, for example, to make it easy, I only count groceries, dining out, and shopping. And my goal, my number is 250, or let's say 500 a week to make it easy. So 500 a week on those three things. I start on Monday and I start tracking my spending in those three areas. And then on Sunday, at the end of the day, I check in and see how much I spent. Any amount below the 500. So if I spent 400, I won $100 in the money game. And in advance, I decide what I want to do with that $100. You can put it all towards a number one priority goal. So all of it goes towards savings or paying down a credit card. Or if that's not as motivating to you, you can do 50-50. So 50% is going to my vacation, 50% is going to my top priority goal. Our motivation is really important, because technically it might make the most financial sense to do something, but if we're more motivated, we'll end up saving a lot more during the money game. So you decide which goals I'm going to prioritize, which it can include something fun you've been saving up for, and then which days I'm going to be tracking. So Mondays I kick off, Sundays I track. You could do midweek to midweek, whatever makes sense with your schedule. But that's how you play the money game. And if you have a partner or you have family, it's really fun to bring them in on the money game, because you're making a lot of decisions with them. So when you're deciding whether or not to order in or to just cook up some pasta, you're like, actually, if we do this, we're going to win that extra money in the money game, and that will go towards our vacation together. So it's fun to bring them in because it aligns them with what your goals are financially. So that is the money game. And I have the money party guide for you. Okay, so ask yourself some questions before making a purchase. So this is more, this sneaky step of saving is more like a realignment, because so often when we're making a purchase, we're acting on impulse. So something happens, someone sent it to us, we're getting an ad, we're seeing something maybe we didn't even know existed, and now we have to have it. So some things to walk through with yourself can be really helpful. So before I make a purchase, taking a step back and saying, can I hold off on this purchase? That's like actually a fun game. Not yet. I think the language we use around money is really important. And when we say not yet to ourselves, it's not saying no, it's just saying, let's see if I can hold off on this. And sometimes when we hold off, like for example, waiting 48 hours, we realize that we didn't even need that thing, or we didn't want it, and it was more of an impulse. So we get to let that impulse wane. So can I hold off on this and try to make that a game to see how long? I have this concept of making something fabulously frugal. And what that means is keeping the parts of something that are really important, but letting go of the things that are not important. And so that could be in a vacation if you're really into food, you're a foodie. Maybe you don't do expensive hotels, but you prioritize expensive restaurants. So sometimes we just do everything, even though some things aren't important to us. So it's about getting clear on what parts about this thing or experience are important to me, and letting go of the things that are not, to save money. So the great part about something being fabulously frugal is that you're not giving up anything that's important to you, but you're giving up consciously the things that aren't adding value so you can save money. So the question to ask, is there a way I could make this fabulously frugal? So is there another way I can go about this spending? Another concept I have is this idea of frugal joys. And frugal joys are free or inexpensive things that make us happy. And they look different for each of us, but we can use them to replace things that cost money in our lives. Or if we're not trying to save anymore, we can just add them to our lives and have more of this joy. So frugal joys are fun to test out because they are different for each of us. I might think that reading outside on a bench on a beautiful day is such a frugal joy, and someone else might think that sounds torturous. So that could be something to think about too. Is there a way that I can replace this with a frugal joy or make it more fabulously frugal? I partnered with this company called Clasp on an online shopping quiz. So this is fun. It takes you through 7 questions. All these things are completely free. Takes you through 5 questions and mirrors them back to you and provides a recommendation if you should buy something, wait, or not buy it. So that's a really good way to take a step back. Even seeing your answers to the questions, regardless of my recommendation, is helpful because it helps you see, oh, I didn't even know about this thing last month. It's going to take away from this goal, and it helps us take that step back and give us the space to make the choice. All right, next slide. I know I said there was a bonus. I can't ever just do the 7. So here are some other ways to sneakily save money. Accountability is so important. There's some really cool statistics about accountability. We have a 65% likelihood of doing something if we tell someone else we're going to do it, which is very high. And then that goes up to 95% if we set a check-in date. So we might do this in other areas of our lives, like how many of you have had a gym buddy? And having a gym buddy makes it more fun to go to the gym. It holds us accountable because they're going to check in if we didn't go. So we're a lot more likely to go to the gym, and we have way more fun doing it if we have a gym buddy. And the same thing goes for our money. But we often don't have money buddies because money is something that we don't talk about, even with our closest friends and family. And hopefully that's changing and opening up these conversations. All of you sharing in the chat, gives me a lot of hope that we're having these conversations. But if we don't share what we're up to in our money lives, and it doesn't have to be like, I have this much debt and I've made this mistake. It can just be like, I am building my rainy day fund. And when we share that with the people in our lives who are closest with us, who make decisions with us, I call them our dream team, then they can support us in our goals. And instead of, a lot of times they're unknowingly sabotaging us because They don't know that we want to save, or that we want to go on that trip, or that we really want to switch jobs and we're trying to save up money for that. So sharing with other people, finding a money buddy, is a really great action item to help us save money. 2 other things: getting cash back on the things you already buy. So if you can install Rakuten or any of those cashback things, if you have a cashback credit card, as long as you're already buying something, getting cash back is great. I think we often fall in this trap of spending money we wouldn't anyway because of cash back. And that is actually, if you're getting 2% cash back, that means you're spending 98% more than you would have. So that's a really bad sale. So only if you were already going to buy something, getting cash back is a nice perk. And then aligning our spending with our values. So that this was actually the money we're using today was about this. We can not only invest in the things that are important to us, like, for example, looking at my phone bill. My phone bill is really important because it allows me to communicate with the people I love and helps me do work that's important to me. But also, what companies am I investing in? Like, what is that company's values? Who do they have in their management team, on their board? What are they investing in? By taking steps to research what a company's values are, we are going to be more mindful about our spending in ways that, and it's because it takes time and because it takes intentionality, we're going to end up spending less, especially on the things that aren't important or that were just kind of happening behind the scenes, not because we wanted them. All right. Next slide. So like I promised, this is all about taking action. Progress is about action. So, and you join this webinar, you should get the benefit of spending the time here. So think about, within the next 48 hours, which of these 7 steps will you take? There's 8, because I did the accountability one. And pick one. It doesn't even have to be this one. If what I went through jogged another thing that you want to do, great, as long as you're taking an action. And if any of these feel too big, break them down to be even smaller. Again, our progress does not have to be linear, it's exponential. So taking action leads to results and more action. So the steps: separate and automate, keep a money journal, look at the opportunity cost, use sinking funds, look at the annual cost, that was through the budgeting, play the money game, ask yourself some pointed questions, and find a money buddy or a group of money buddies. So I'd love it if you share in the chat which step you're going to take. Awesome. I'm seeing automate, money journal, opportunity costs, sinking funds. Awesome. Opportunity costs, money buddy, ask the questions, money game. Everyone's doing all the different ones. Great, so many steps. And all right, so next slide. So one thing I would love to offer to all of you is to hold you accountable for these steps. Right around when we started the pandemic, we launched a Fiscal Femme Slack community, and it was a place for amazing feminist money buddies to come together and support each other. So I'm going to share the link in there. It's 100% free. What was really cool to see is people sharing, oh, I got this specific discount from my auto insurer, or I was able to negotiate this with my credit card. So seeing the power of people sharing not only the steps they're taking and holding each other accountable, but of the results they're getting, and then helping people negotiate with their credit card companies or inspiring them to take action in the same way. So if you're looking for, in addition to your individual money buddies, we would love to have you. So put that in here. All right, next slide. And this is the last slide before our Q&A. So thank you so much for joining. This has been such a pleasure, and you've been such an interactive and fun group. I'd love to stay connected with you. So like I mentioned, sign up for our weekly money musing to stay up to date on what's happening, our money parties. I call it a textbook's worth of knowledge about money for 2 minutes in our weekly email. And then I'm on social at the Fiscal Femme. So you can come on there and chat with me. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Amazing. Thank you, Ashley. This is incredible. And while you guys think about your questions, I also want to take the ones that are already in the chat. So yeah, we'll let you have a sip of water and then it's back to work. No, just kidding. Okay, so let's start with the first one. So Rachel asks, for those of us who are self-proclaimed quote unquote spenders, what are some practical ways to reframe our thinking and habits to help flip the switch and encourage our inner saver to come out a bit more? I think that's a good question.
It's such a good question. And what I love about it is it's about mindset. And I think when we often think personal finance is all these objective strategies, but the place that most of us get tripped up is in the emotional behavioral. So I'd say like the biggest mindset shift that I see in people who start to enjoy saving, right? They become savers, is that it switches from this thing, like kind of like with the budgeting, that it's this thing that's going to limit my fund, it's going to be restrictive, to viewing it as this active radical self-love of giving to myself. So when we start to see it as this gift, or this positive because I get to do X, Y, Z, like what is that giving me can help us motivate us to save.
Yeah, I also think that the accountability partner piece of that could also be helpful because it is a habit and it is a behavior. And I think those are always challenging for especially for humans to change. So Rachel, definitely consider joining Fiscal Femme Slack community and you'll have that as well. Because I also feel like if you're saving and people are cheering you on and you have to like let someone know about it, you'll probably also do that too.
Right. Yeah, there's like a flip that switches where it's more fun to save than spend. And that's where we try to get there.
Yeah, exactly. Liz, that's a good question in the live chat. You should put in the ask the question because I bet you someone else has that too. Okay, so Michelle said, how do you determine if you should save or pay down your debt or just save a small amount in addition to paying off your debt? Thanks.
So this is a question about prioritizing, like where do I put my money right now? And I think always, but it really gets highlighted in a pandemic when our incomes might be in question. So many people are laid off and furloughed, that cash is really important. So first and foremost, even before credit card debt or any type of a debt, we want to have some savings to protect ourselves. And then from there, we can do a mix of prioritizing paying down high interest debt. And so I would say starting with the rainy day fund is probably the way I'd recommend going.
Yeah. And I think for at least in the past webinars that we've had, Michelle, there was a good one that Amanda Holden did where she like went in detail about like the order of what things should go depending on what your debt is, student loan debt, because not all debt is created equal. So I would also recommend watch that replay. Okay. Glennie said, for a breadwinner, how can I avoid having guilt trips whenever I save for myself, for my personal goals, instead of contributing to the household finances?
That's a really great question. So partners and finances, there's a bunch of ways to do it, but I think in the case, it's really helpful to have a conversation of what percentage do I want to be contributing to the household, so that there's a set number. And that might mean if all of our accounts are together, that we just are tracking that, or if there's a joint account, but deciding, okay, this percentage, this is what's going towards the family finances or the joint finances, and this is what's going to my goals, so that it's very clear. And that's why sometimes it's nice to have separate accounts that we're contributing. So it's that as long as I stay within, as long as I'm saving this much for my personal goals or spending this much on my personal life, it doesn't matter what it's going towards, as long as I'm making the contribution I promised or that we decided to the family finances.
Yeah, my mom gave me that tip a long time ago. She was like, decide on your percentage so that you can always have whatever, like your own bucket, if, ideally. And that's not always the case, right? Sometimes that's going to change too. So
keep checking in because we value different things. And so it's very easy for someone to judge what we're spending our money on.
Exactly. Yeah. Another reason why to get an accountability partner, because I feel like they'll also help you maybe not feel guilty about something. I feel like it's easy for us to feel guilty about it, but for someone else to be like, no, if that's what you want, you deserve it, and like you've kind of worked it out like that, then go for it.
Right.
Okay, so Paula said, if you're trying to pay down debt, but right now want to hold on to cash, do you pay the minimum amount even if you can pay more?
So this goes back to if your rainy day fund is built. And so I can send, there's an article I recently did on revisiting our rainy day funds and figuring out how much we want to have in there, because it's interesting. We often decide how much in cash to keep when things are going really well. And it's a unique opportunity to say, now things are not necessarily going well, or maybe I'm more fearful that they're not going to go well. How many months of savings do I want to have in cash? And then what does my emergency spending look like? Because our spending often looks different in the case of an emergency, or maybe you decide, no, I want to keep all my things I'm doing in an emergency too, and that's fine. But we just want to be clear on how much we're spending in the month, how many months. And then I would say prioritizing, there could be levels, like you could have the minimum emergency fund I want, and then the goal. And so maybe once you have the minimum, you prioritize the debt a little bit more, but definitely getting that minimum and paying the minimum, getting the minimum emergency fund set up, and that while you're paying the minimums before you start prioritizing paying down the debt more. And I have
so Paula, also check out fiscalfemme.com because you've got some blog posts you're saying on that too.
Yes, and I just put in the chat a debt tracker I have. So once you have your rainy day fund, that helps you get clear on what debt you have and how to prioritize which pieces of debt first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, Sarah says, regarding student loan debt, after you have an emergency fund, should you focus on paying that off first or saving for a 20% house down payment?
I'm sending the rainy day fund article. So yes, I love that everyone's now like rainy day fund first. So it's completely, so there's a few things to think about here. There's no like black and white answer that I could say house comes first or your student loan debt comes first. So one of the things you'll see in the finance space is idea of 7% or less. So if your student loans are 7% or less, people will say, or maybe less than 7%, people say that might be a trade-off where you start investing, because that's about what you can earn in the market. So that's what the answer
interest rate too. That 7% is the interest rate on the debt. Mm-hmm.
Interest rate on the student loan. If it's higher than that, financially, it might make sense to prioritize paying that down, just because the interest rate is costing you more than what you would earn in the market. So it also a really important thing to take into account, because we talked about earlier how not always for example, one of the strategies to paying down credit cards or debt is to start with the smallest balances first. It's called the snowball method, because it feels so good to pay something off that we build momentum and we end up often paying off more than if we prioritize the highest interest rate debt, and that's also the biggest piece and it takes us the longest. So sometimes a lot of times actually, the emotional pieces of it is really important. So if debt is something that's really difficult for you, like I know some people with student loans, that's number one priority. They want to get rid of that as soon as possible. Others are like doctors will have big houses. They'll just treat it as a monthly payment and it doesn't bother them. So I think thinking about what your relationship to your debt is also really important in deciding if you want to prioritize paying that down first or saving for the home.
Yeah. And someone asked about good debt versus bad debt. And that's what people are talking about. Like student loans that are like at 5 and 6% interest rate is considered good debt just because it's not really high. Whereas like a credit card could be at like 20% interest rate. And it's like, that's bad debt. So, but there's you guys can Google that. There's lots of research on that. I want to make sure we get to, Sarah said, gave you some advice, Glennie too. So, Sarah also said, to build on Glennie's question, my boyfriend and I are not advice, but question. My boyfriend and I are discussing marriage. I make twice as much money as him. We split our living expenses equally now. We'd like to buy a house in the future after marriage. Once we're married, does it make more sense to keep splitting things from separate accounts or combine finances? What's the best way to save for a house while not making him feel like he's not contributing? So, yeah, I think we should probably do a webinar on overall like finances and partners.
Definitely. And it's really, so I think with partners, it's really important to know, because part of the question is not making them feel bad. And so a really important money question to have is kind of like, where are we coming from with money? So what's my biggest fear around money? What was my family like growing up? Because we might think something might make someone feel bad, but that's not their experience at all. And they could care less about that. So understanding the things that might trigger them to be stressed or not happy with the financial situation in a partnership. And so I think that's the same thing goes for whether or not to combine accounts completely. I think accountability, we talked about this a lot, is really important. So sometimes when we have everything together, and often in relationships, there's a saver and a spender, and we tend to polarize each other. So the more the spender spends, the more the saver wants to hold on to the money. And or it can just feel like, wait, my partner's spending all this money. Why do I have to be careful? So sometimes it's, as long as we track what's in the joint, if everything's together and we're held accountable, that's great. And then others feel a lot more comfortable having their own accounts and having their own money. So there's really not one right way to do it, but it is important to, if someone is earning a lot more and they want to contribute to the joint goals, to be able to get that progress more quickly if that feels good to you. So I think that it's not a black and white answer again, but it's more about the conversation of what's workable, how you both feel comfortable with your accounts. And I do think, like in this case, the motivation is so important. So maybe the breadwinner in this case covers more bills so that the partner is able to put more towards this house and feel like they're contributing to that exciting thing. So thinking about the motivation behind what will get you to that house goal faster. Yeah,
motivations and expectations, right? So good question, Sarah. Okay. Anadita said, any advice for someone investing their money for the first time, resources, websites to learn from, etc. The How to Money podcast, or Annalise said the How to Money podcast is pretty good. But yeah, so first time investors, like, what are your go-to resources?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing with investing is that, of course, you want to understand it, learn a little bit, but we learn so much more by doing. And I know it can feel scary to get started when we don't know everything, but even taking a small amount of money to just invest, because you could read every single book, you could learn all about it, but until you're actually doing it, it just is a much quicker learning curve. So I have an investing guide that I'm like obsessed with, because it's very detailed on kind of everything you need to know to get started. You can do it on your own. So you could open up your own brokerage account and just buy a share of something like the S&P 500 and have that experience. So it's almost like, I would think about it as how we would invest in going to a concert. Like this is or a class, this is investing in learning to invest. Or you can use an app or a robo-advisor and go through that process. And essentially you pay a small fee, like a percentage, like 0.25%, and they will invest it for you. So
do you have any favorite apps? Because I know a lot of people have asked about that. And I think there's so many that it becomes like, which of those like investing apps are like legitimate, which ones are bad? Like I know someone on our team, I think loves, is it Albert? Is that one?
Yeah. So I think the hard part is it's so much up to personal preference.
Yeah.
But as long as, like, I would read reviews here. I'm sending the investing guide. And understanding if you want somebody to kind of like, someone mentioned Digit. So there's basically the investing versions of Digit, like Acorns and Robinhood, and they'll steal money from you, but it's your own money to invest.
Yeah.
Versus like a robo-advisor, which there is like a Wealthfront, Betterment, Ellevest. You tell them how much money you want to transfer to your investments every month. So it's more, some of them are more like sneakily taking money from you versus setting up a transfer. But there are so many, it's so personal. I think the ones I'll mention people love. I know Robinhood has been having some issues with staying online, but before that, people loved it.
I feel like the general answer to this always, you guys, is like Ashley can give you ideas. Look at her investing guide, but you have to do the work of educating yourself and researching. So that means reading the books, listening to the podcast, reading these guides, going to a money party of Ashley's. Like, you know, if this is going to be your thing, then just like truly invest time every week to learn more about that. All right, Ashley, thank you so much. We don't want to take up more of your time. You did an incredible job. Thank you so much for the presentation. I know that for me, I'm a visual learner, so it was really easy to follow along with that. You guys are all going to get the links to this replay for Ashley's webinar, and I'll also include the link to Slack, your budget tool, which is incredible, and also your money party that people can go to, which are all totally free. Yeah, do your due diligence. So thank you to everybody who joined this webinar. I'm actually going to be next week. We're not going to have a webinar. We're going to have a Career Contessa community hour. We're only going to be able to have 65 people on that. And what it is, it's an hour to give feedback on, you know, what you like at Career Contessa, what you want to see more of. Kind of think of this as like part focus group, part feedback, and people will be allowed to be invited on screen, kind of like what I did with Ashley here. So if you guys are interested in that at all, especially for people who are really involved in Career Contessa, read us a lot, use our resources, check out that. It's under webinars on our website, and sign up for it if you have any interest in giving us feedback. We'd really love that. And like I said, there's only 65 spots. I've been trying to be careful about not promoting it too wide, knowing that not everybody will be able to get in. But if it's really popular, I'd love to do it again, because we want to know how we can improve Career Contessa for all of you. So check that out. And then Ashley, thank you. Thank you so much. This was really fun. You guys have been an incredible group. Awesome. All right. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Bye.